Good afternoon. Thank you, Mark and Art, for including me in this. This is an exciting forum. I've really enjoyed coming to ARC in the past, and the conversation that we're looking at this afternoon is one that's dear to my heart. I am the process control director for Weston. We are a recently spun off company from the ConAgra mothership, a large company that we're very excited to be our own publicly traded company. Now we're growing fast. There's a lot going on in our organization, and I do enjoy a lot of support for controls projects, for process control initiatives that we put out there. I was telling some people earlier that I have the good fortune to be on my third greenfield plant build. The first one about killed us all, and then after we learned everything not to do, we went into another one. I had a very good experience with process control installation on that one, and now we're on a third one. We're right in the middle of it right now. So I do have a passion for this technology and for where we are driving our company. I'm charged with oversight of large projects, but also guiding a strategic direction for our company. And you might be surprised at what goes into making a French fry. We have a dozen or so plants in the US and plants scattered about Europe. We even have a plant in China now that we have fired up. So we're trying to become more global, and we think that's where our growth opportunities really are. So let's see. Okay. It's interesting to me that so many of these presentations use the auto industry as a metaphor for where we've come, but I really think it is a good look at, you look at the early automobiles and the mechanical nature of those. The support staff was very mechanical. Now you look towards the newer automobiles and what it takes to fix them. I was thinking about the first car I ever drove. It was an early 60s Ford Ranchero. My brother and I set the points on it with a screwdriver and a matchbook cover for the gap gauge. And that's about as hard as it got. And we figured out a couple of pieces of wire and a screwdriver, and you could hot wire it. So we took care of our own stuff. I don't even open the hood on my newer model car. The most I'm allowed to do is top off the liquids. They are so complex now. And I wanted to use this example to frame the conversation, because we've gone from brute force to information in the information age. I thought Mark did a really good job of articulating what those inflection points have been in the industry. And I've even witnessed a couple of them in my career. Incidentally, I grew up in the IT space. I spent 15 years in IT before kind of morphing into a process controls, process technologist. It's funny that when the IT guys thought I was going to the dark side, and the controls guys thought I just came from there. So for what that's worth. Where do we find ourselves today? And I'll bet a lot of companies that you represent sitting here today, you're seeing the same things that we have. Things have grown. The automation has grown faster than we've adapted to it, hasn't it? Why is that? I think in part it's because we've gotten away with it. And I'm going to operations. I'm going to pick on them a little bit today, operations management, because I can't blame them, but they've gotten away with it. And you come to them with a project that you want them to spend dollars. Now tell me again why I need to spend $1 million to upgrade the PLCs in this plant and not get any more production. Those are the kinds of conversations that we have to have with these people, but they're important because that's where we're going. So I look at this as a trifecta of process control challenges, and again, I'm guessing that this resonates with what you deal with at your respective companies. The first being, we are ever more reliant on our technologies. They're advancing quickly, faster than we can put people underneath them to support them. We're very reliant upon those things. We had a factory that basically shut down just a week or so ago, and they called me up and they said, how can we fix this? The network went down and it took my factory down. Well, we've talked about this. Yes, we build in redundancy. Sometimes the perfect storm happens, but those are conversations that you have to enter into when you're about to install more deep technology and automation in your facility. We have an increased demand for run days. Bob, take the week off. We don't need this week's production, said no ops manager ever, right? You need more. In all seriousness, when I started in the food industry, 270 days was considered a pretty heavy run. Wow, we're pushing these plants to run so hard now. And that says something about the maintainability, not only of the physical assets that you have, but the control systems that you have underlying that and making them run. I'm going to speak about it a little bit more in a minute, the implications that has for your staff and how you're going to be able to staff your plants. And then there's this change of demographics, and I've heard 2 or 3 times this week, because it really is a big issue. This issue that you mentioned, Mark, about 10,000 baby boomers a week retiring. Wow, it's the truth. And in my little corner of the world, I'm seeing it. That is really a big problem. And it's a problem that's getting worse. I'll add something to that, and that is, for whatever reason, the younger generations don't tend to gravitate towards the hands-on trade, which process control is considered, I think, as much as we did. Right or wrong, there's a different conversation about the reasons for that, but I'm seeing that it's the truth. And so it's something that we really do need to adjust to and realize it's coming. In short, we've hitched our wagons to this automation train, and we've bought everything that goes with that. We haven't realized, I think, until just now what some of those things are. Which brings us to the technical dilemma, and I'm trying to speak from a real pragmatic guy on the floor standpoint here in what the problem that we have and how do we counter it. Too much is being left to too few people, and I'll bring out a concept that I call the good old Bob model. I'll bet a lot of you have good old Bob at your plants. He's the guy that he may have started out as an electrician. That's where a lot of controls techies grew from, isn't it? I have guys on my team, they're both licensed electricians. That's where a lot of them came from. Good old Bob would do anything. He's the one that learned how to run your systems. He's the one that's there on the weekends, keeping things going. He is the all-knowing, omnipotent God of your controls universe at your plant. And unfortunately, we have those in our plants too. And these are the guys sometimes that they're calling out off a fishing trip because presumably nobody else knows or has the access or the passwords to your control systems. If you're in that situation, wow, you really need to take a fresh look at that. Maintaining your bench strength. What are the skills that you're trying to grow? What are the things that you're trying to bring into your organization? Where are the gaps that you have? I'll tell you one we have. We're spending a lot of time and effort on some advanced control strategies, and realize that we need somebody on staff to help us with that. So I went to the senior leadership team and pled my case, and they've been real gracious to allow me to hire somebody. So I'm having to add somebody to fill in that gap that I saw that I had. I didn't have the bandwidth to be able to fill. And the same goes with your techies and your plants. By show of hands in your organizations, if a techie drop, controls tech drop from heaven like manna, how many of you would hiring right now? How many would hire 2 or 3? How many would hire a half a dozen? Wow, I expected that. Just in our little corner of the world, I'll bet we'd hire 5 if we could find them. We're hiring kids right out of school. I'm begging and pleading with my own sons, hey, go into electronics and controls. You're gonna write your ticket. So what tools do you need to provide them? I think I heard Janet talk a little bit about this. Your controls techie is evolving, isn't he? Now, I come from the school of you don't decouple yourself from IT. You have to create a better relationship with them. So I don't advocate growing your own network guru and your own database guru, but your controls techie has to have some of those skills. They have to be savvy at speaking to those things. You don't install a historian without knowing something about databases, database retention, things like data compression. Those guys have to know all that stuff. Another thing I would point out is reporting. You know, we've gotten by for years with spindles, terabytes of data spinning on our drives, and aren't we getting to the point now where operations, and well, they're coming back and demanding that we present that information to them in some way they can look at it and take action. That's another thing that your techie has to know. So I think as far as taking the message home and trying to look at it where the issues really are, operations really does need to adapt. The operations plant floor supervision all the way through operations management and the senior leadership team. Keep in mind that the status quo isn't. There's no end point. You're at a point on a continuum. And the salient point is that you are moving in the right direction and making the right choices so that 3 years down the road, you have seen technology X coming and you're a little bit better equipped to deal with it. Technology continues to outpace your skill set on the floor. You've got to figure out where the gaps are and begin to fill those. And there still are pretty jealously guarded silos out there, aren't there? I am astonished to hear at big companies how there still is infighting between IT and OT. I can tell you when we were first allowed to announce this new facility that we're building in the Tri-Cities, I think the first or second call I made was to the IT guys, hey, have you heard about this project? I want to pull you in the team. Hey, services guy, who do you have that you can give me for this project? They're involved in all my meetings. They're involved in the decisions, even stuff like what PLCs we use and how we back them, back things up. Do we put UPSs in the cabinets? I include those guys in the whole thing. So if those silos are still jealously guarded in your organizations, you've got to bring those together. You've got to react to the dynamics of that demographic shift, and that is huge. Talked about that a little earlier, but man, there just aren't the people out there. I've talked with a couple of the colleges that have programs for process control technicians, and I've seen companies, our own companies doing doing this. One of the guys at one of our plants going through the program right now, he's already earmarked as an apprentice. And I know darn well they're going to bring him on full-fledged process control techie as soon as he's done with his training. And I think the real key takeaway here, on this slide is the last thing, and it is that operations needs to accept that they're only seeing half the formula, and that is automation is great for me because that's fewer manual tasks and a lot better efficiencies. What operations manager doesn't want that? The part of it that's really hard to swallow because it takes money is it also means technical operators and more technical staff, doesn't it? I mean, really, a lot of these plants, even in my tenure, which I look back 10, 15 years, and I see that plants that had dozens of people milling around doing all of these manual things, you walk through some of the more automated ones and you're a little hard pressed to find more than a handful of people. Well, I think the message here is clear, and if you're in operations or operations management, you're sitting here, please take this to heart. If you have their ear when you get back to your plant, let them know it's time to pay the automation piper. We've been reaping the benefits for a long time and been kind of fat, dumb, and happy, not realizing that we need to add technicians to the staff. And the old model was to kind of self-adjust, wasn't it? As more automation came in, remember good old Bob? He took on more, didn't he? Well, those people, that's another piece of that demographic shift, and I think that maybe some of the younger people coming into the workforce aren't as keen to spend 70 hours a week during a shutdown at the plant. That's been my experience. When we were building a plant, we did that, and I think that that's a sign of probably a good opportunity for a little better project management, but we were working these guys to death, and we tried to follow the mantra, hey, we're gonna work you a couple of weeks and send you home. Well, we got behind the 8 ball. We kept asking these guys to stay over, and this integration company's manager even reached into his pocket with some, what I thought was pretty generous bonuses, and after a while, these guys turned him down. I gotta get home to my family. 4 weeks is just too much. So there's that to think about as well. This is the action piece. We are the agents of change. I have the good fortune to work for a company that really does try to empower people, and hey, you come with the ideas, you're gonna have responsibility for executing, but don't want to hear you complaining about an issue. Come with a solution. And I would say this here, we're the agents of change. If you're going back to your company, you see that you've got some of these issues. It's not something that somebody's just, your ops manager isn't just gonna wake up one day and say, you know what, I realize I need to spend a lot more money on controls. They've got other fish to fry. So rethink the good old Bob mantra. And I'm going to point something else out here regarding good old Bob. I've heard this so many times at plants. Well, yeah, it's really hard because, we want them to take a look at outside resources, other integrators. Well, nobody really knows the plant like Bob. And I'll tell you what I found out. That's a bunch of hooey. Good old Bob is sharp, and he's a good asset to you, but it really astonishes me sometimes how I can pull a really savvy, high quality integration guy in, and within even hours, he's fixing problems, he's understanding issues. And I found out another thing, another set of eyes, a fresh set of eyes. We've really gained a lot there with bringing in fresh integrators. We do that a lot. We hire integrators to do medium to large projects, and we'll even pull them in to help an already overburdened staff. Good old Bob's busy taking care of the plant. And if it's a very big plant, he's got plenty on his plate. So rethink that. Maybe you need to reach out to integrators. Tell you one thing we did that so far has been a real success. We kind of made a pilot out of, we had 2 plants that both lost their key process control engineer. They were big plants. And these two plants were really hurting. And we went and reached out to some of the integrators and said, hey, fresh slate, let's take the blinders off. What can you do for us? What kind of a hourly rate can you give us if we sign up for so many hours? And one guy came back and said, hey, I'll give you this. And by the way, if you'll, for an adder of X dollars, I'll guarantee you a 2-hour turnaround. I'll either be logged in and helping you or on my way to your plant. And that quelled the fears of the plant operations group. So far, that's been working really well. And as I mentioned before, it was pretty surprising how quickly this guy came up to speed, and now he's kind of one of the team. I'm a firm believer that this is a model that is going to become more and more and more prevalent. And as I've talked to integration service firms across the country, I'm hearing that from them. You know what, we're not doing much now, but we think that that's going to be a pretty big business for us. That's one way to counter that demographic shift too, I think too. Security needs to be treated like safety. Remember how we all decided safety was pretty important to us, and then we said it's a priority, and then we said, wait a minute, that has the connotation that priority can change. Nah, it needs to be culture. Security needs to be culture. And the point that I would bring up there is, when the IT guys come and start talking to you about security, and no, I don't want you bringing that handheld device in the plant and just attaching it to the network. They're not just whining. It's a big deal. Make adaptability a key skill. How many of you recognize this? Now, don't lie. How many of you've had involvement with these in your career? Now, by raising your hand, you just dated yourself. But, what's that? This is 8-inch. It's just too far away from you. Well, I keep this on my wall, and not only is it a great conversation piece, I just love talking to young IT guys about it because their eyes, they look at it with the same awe that I watched my dad play my grandma's old Victrola. Whoa, really, dude? 118K? Is that all? But anyway, I try to keep it on my wall too so that I understand and remember where I came from and how quickly things change. Adaptability is huge. We all use the buzzword, but wow, is it ever something that we need to look for in people? That's something that I really, really like about the young millennials. Tell one of them they can't do it and see what you get. Yeah, I can. There's an old piece of machinery out there to automate, pull a date off. Yeah, we can do it. Blur the lines separating IT and OT. I lived in both worlds. And as I mentioned before, it's amazing to me how many people still think that they should draw a bead and shoot the other guys. Integrate IT into the culture. These aren't the guys you invite to Thanksgiving and you sit them at the kids' table. Bring them to the adult table. As I mentioned, I ask them to get involved in my projects, even small ones, because I know I have to have their support. And I don't want to grow my own Cisco gurus. We've got to get better at reporting and the actionable reporting. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. So I think to summarize, we have a lot going on. There's a lot of churn in the industry right now. I think we have hit another inflection point where it's not just enough to create the product. You have to supply the data that supports it. And we have to react to some real challenges that we have in the industry with filling that technical role. Thank you.